and would be humbled. And really, I would just so appreciate your support for my reelection campaign. Thank you again, Democrats, for your leadership.
Thank you very much to the Pinole candidates and all the best. Good luck to all of you. I'm going to kick this back to Maria Alegria or Jamin.
All right.
Okay, Jamin, go ahead.
Next one up is going to be Rafael, Menis. Right? Where are we? Trying to find.
Did we lose him?
Nope, I'm here. Just
hi,
waiting for you
Rafael.
folks to set up the timer before I start talking.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get you pinned and all the good stuff. Where are you?
Okay.
Mm,
You know when you're ready, Jamin.
Yep. Adding pins, and then Michael, you're the one prompting questions, so I'm gonna pin you as well. All right. Michael, what's your question timer for so Miss Saduth can run that?
Well, I'm sure we've been doing 3-2, so
Okay.
we can continue to do that for the different sections: intro, answer questions, and closing.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Sounds good. All right. Cheryl, can we reset that 3 and then you guys can take off?
Okay.
All right.
Rafael, thank you for your patience with our changing of times, trying to squeeze everyone in. Happens every time we do this.
It's quite all right. Gave me enough time to have breakfast and all that.
Well, good. I haven't eaten breakfast yet either. So tell us about yourself in your 3 minutes.
Certainly. So, good morning, Democrats. My name is Rafael Menis, and I'm running for Pinole City Treasurer because I want to protect Pinole's future by making the city's finances more accessible to the community, helping the community hold the city accountable, and taking various actions to make that happen. And the reasons why I can do that is based on my experience and who I fundamentally am as a person. I've been serving the city of Pinole by serving on various commissions since, I want to say, 2019. I served on the Community Services Commission from 2019 to 2021. I've been serving on the Planning Commission since 2021. I'm currently, for this current year, the chair of the Pinole Planning Commission. And while there, we worked to update the city's housing element, which is going to have a major impact on a number of the items that the council members discussed, though that's not directly linked to the treasurer's role. But it also taught me more about working within city systems, reading over, hundreds of pages of dense technical documents like CEQA documents. I've also been doing work as an assistant to my mother's business, Flourishing Daylilies, where I every year help her with her taxes and her bookkeeping, which is more directly related to a treasurer's role, because one of the core responsibilities there is to make sure that all the transactions line up with what they're supposed to be. And that's something that I've been doing year after year after year. And finally, in terms of my personal qualifications, is the fact that I'm autistic. My neurodivergence makes me more detail-oriented than most people. I catch details that most people miss. I see patterns that most people can't. Even in this past year, I've been asking questions to try and make the city more accountable about its investments, like the Section 115 trust that was invested earlier. We haven't had a proper benchmark set up for that. It wasn't asked for. I asked for it. So now we're starting to work towards making that happen. I think that a major problem the city faces is that 34% of the population, whether it's back in 2022 or currently in 2024, doesn't know enough about the city's budget to have an opinion on whether it's doing well or poorly. And so in order to take the necessary steps that we need to safeguard the city's funds, the community needs to be aware of the city's budget, where it's strong, where it's weak, and what our long-term threats are that we're facing, which is not just CalPERS, but also the increasing rise in healthcare costs. Thank you.
I love the music. So you're running against a Republican, right? One of the few Republicans in the West County.
That's right, Roy Swearingen.
So you sort of explained why you're running. What are the three most important issues facing Pinole fiscally?
Fiscally, the big problem, and it's thanks to the council, the I guess current council, setting up various studies to evaluate the city's long-term fiscal situation, that we have information on this. The first problem that we have, and it's a problem that all cities have, is that our revenues don't rise as quickly as our costs. Property tax is limited to rising at 2% per year maximum. And we've been able to offset that slightly by the end of the successor agency and the reintegration of redevelopment funds into the city's budget, but that's really a one-time benefit and not ongoing. In the medium to long term, the city is facing peril from rising CalPERS costs and rising retiree healthcare costs. CalPERS costs are going to peak around 2035. Healthcare costs never stop increasing. They keep on going up and up and up. CalPERS costs will be back down to around $1 million by 2044. Healthcare costs, they're going to be up to around, I think, $7 million by that point in time.
Let me suggest that a single payer program would save a lot of money for your municipality.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't hear you.
Oh, it was just a comment that you're concerned about healthcare costs in the future. Single payer cuts those.
Definitely. I think that single payer is ultimately going to be essential for the city of Pinole to meet its fiscal obligations, because if that's not implemented, even if we get the necessary funds to pay our retiree healthcare obligations, it's just going to be eaten right back up by rising healthcare costs. And as the studies show, we can't get there just by cutting our way out of things without slashing entire departments. We need new revenues.
So if someone came up and said, "What's your elevator speech? What's your quick pitch at the door?"
Sure. So my big pitch is Rafael Menis. I'm running for Pinole City Treasurer because I want to make the city's finances more accessible, help the community hold the city accountable, and take action to make that happen. 34% of the community doesn't have enough information about the budget to know whether we're doing well or poorly. That's unacceptable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have charts, and I have some on my website, which you can find at menisfortreasurer.org, showing directly what we're spending money on, where we're getting money from, and what the trends are that show long-term threats that we're facing. Well, I want to talk some more about the Section 115 trust, but that's not really part of the 1-minute speech. So I'll save that for later.
What are the budgets in Pinole? How much are they?
Let me pull that document up because the city finally uploaded the latest budget. There were some changes made in the June 25th meeting, so for a while there wasn't a fully up-to-date budget available. So focusing on the general fund, there's revenue of 28 million and expenditures of 37 million. And then that's offset by funds in from the Section 115 fund, which is going to run out around 2030 at current trends. So that's another nearer term problem the city also needs to worry about. And also this year offsets from the general reserve. and the remainder comes from fund balance. So earlier when we were talking about whether or not the city of Pinole had a deficit or not, we were looking at it primarily in terms of ongoing costs, because due to CalPERS making an error, the city had about $700,000 in unexpected expenditures this year based on that. And there were also rising benefits costs that made up a lot of the remainder of that expenditure. But there were also a lot more funds spent because the way the city does capital improvement projects, they're accounting basically for the entirety of the funds in the first year. So that's why there's a mismatch in revenues and expenditures. Ongoing matches, one time doesn't, because the city's spending down a fair amount of its one-time unallocated fund balance to fund various capital improvement projects.
Where does the money come from? What are the sources?
So the city of Pinole gets $6 million from property taxes. It gets 8 million, well, actually probably closer to $10 million from sales tax. And that's including the main sales tax, the Measure S 2006, and the Measure S 2014 sales taxes. You need to account for all three. And let's see, go back up to the correct page here because I was looking at a different one. There we go. You've got the utility users tax, which is 8%, that's 2 million. You have intergovernmental taxes, that's 2.4 million. You have public safety charges, which is basically payments from El Cerrito and San Pablo, I think, for funding the dispatch center. That's 1.7 million. There's transfers in from the pension fund and from reserves. That's 3.2 million. There's franchise taxes, that's 850,000. And there's various other taxes, that's 924,000. So the majority of the city's revenue comes from property tax and sales tax.
What does the investment portfolio look like? What do the investments look like that the city has?
That depends on whether you're looking at the Section 115 trust or the city's broader investments that it has in reserves, because there are different rules for, or I guess I should say different policies for how the city invests those funds. Give me a moment to pull up the relevant charts. I think the most recent one was apologies, probably should have hunted that down before I got to this point. Investment report. March.
We can skip on to the next ones and come back.
One. If you like, I think I've just about hunted it down here. Second quarter investment report. There we go. That'll be E.
Just a reminder, Michael, that we're on a time.
Yes, we'll move on. How
Okay.
would you change the investment plan that the city has? And let me just add that most cities, pool their money. Are we better off pooling it or investing by ourselves and why?
Okay, so I finally managed to hunt down the relevant pages for the investment report, and that's actually pretty relevant for this particular question as well. The city has most of its non-Section 115 trust invested in the LAIF pool, which currently has a yield of 3.9. It also has other funds in CalTrust. It has about 7% there. It has 15% in money market savings funds. It has about 10% in mutual funds. It has 6.5% in certificates of deposit. It has 2% in medium-term corporate notes. It has about 1% in federal agency securities. And frankly, I feel like the yield for many of these is lower than we could be gaining, given that the yield on cash right now at the current interest rate is 5. And a lot of these are 2s or 3s or 4s. And you can see this more if you look at the city's Section 115 trust portfolio summary. And for reference that people want to look at what I'm talking about, I'm referencing the city's March 5th agenda packet, page 88 for the city's investment report portfolio summary, and page 90 for the city's Section 115 trust portfolio summary. And I had a major issue with that one, which I brought up at the finance subcommittee meeting and at multiple different meetings, because the city has 35% of its funds of a Section 115 trust invested in equity mutual funds, which have a yield of 1.3. And we have only 4.2% of our funds invested in cash and equivalents, which has a yield of 5.2, 5.26, if we want to go out to the second significant digit. And the broader problem was that the city hadn't even considered changing how policy defined how it was going to allocate its funds between the various different categories, because that was set based on policy. And I guess that's my time on that question.
And that's it. Thank you very much, Rafael. And where it goes from here, tomorrow the DPCCC people meet and we'll take the votes from the clubs, the club vote, any consideration, and then that goes on to the central committee itself in a couple weeks. So
Well, you still have 15 minutes for me, I think, by the time. Do you have any more questions?
well, actually, I do have a couple of them. Having been a CFO myself, most public bodies don't elect their fiscal officer. What are the advantages and disadvantages of an elected treasurer as opposed to an appointed one?
So first, I would note that a lot of what people think the treasurer does is actually a duty of the city's finance director. The treasurer offers advice to the finance director on the city's investments, but he or they or whoever doesn't have the power to compel. That's ultimately the finance director's responsibility. What they do is they check to make sure that funds are invested properly and securely. They take accountability. But also, I would argue the advantage to having an elected treasurer is that they have legitimacy from the people to go and ask questions, difficult questions, questions that people don't necessarily want answered, like, why are these funds being used in this way? Are we allocating things the right way? Should we be doing things differently? If you just have an appointed treasurer, they may not feel that they have the necessary legitimacy to be able to ask those questions. As an elected, you're representing your constituents. You're their voice.
Okay. Do you feel that there is systemic racism present in your city? And if so, how would you address it as, in essence, a department head?
Unfortunately, I do think that there still is systemic racism present in Pinole. We've made major strides, to be clear, since the 1980s when there were cross burnings in the city. But even as the 6th most diverse city in California, we're still at a moderate level of segregation in terms of intercity measurements. And there's still active anti-racial animus expressed at times through public comments in various meetings and through public statements. So I think one important thing is to be clear about the importance of coming together as a community and fighting united against hate. That's one of the reasons why I'm grateful to the councils past and present who unanimously backed City Pinole being a city that's part of the United Against Hate initiative. I'm going to make clear as a person that I stand for integration and equity and fighting to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. Because I think that bigotry is simply unacceptable in a city like Pinole, or anywhere really, but especially in a diverse city like Pinole. I don't think that we should shut people's voices out because of who they are.
Okay, thank you. Who represents the workers there in Pinole?
I'm not sure I follow. Do you mean
Which unions represent the workers in Pinole?
there's AFSCME Local 1, Local 253, I think. There's the IAFF, and there's the Pinole Police Employees Association. I've been attempting to get in contact with AFSCME Local 1 for several weeks, but unfortunately the local contact is out on medical leave, and the number I was given for the backup contact goes to an answering machine that is full and so cannot take messages.
Okay, last question. What can you do as treasurer to spur economic development?
I would say that that's a bit outside the treasurer's role. Frankly, the main thing that they could do is make sure that the city's finances are in a healthy position by making sure that we're investing wisely and earning good rates of return on our investment, and making sure that we're spending money on the things that we're saying we're spending it on, and spending the amounts we say we're going to spend, so that people can have confidence that the city's finances are well managed and that the city has the funds to do what it needs to do to pay its workers, to pay their long-term costs, to pay for the major infrastructure investments that the city needs. We've been making steps towards that, but there's definitely more work that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you very much. You want to do a minute of close? Anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. So I think ultimately it's important that people know what's going on in Pinole. That's why I've been sending out newsletters to let people know what's going on. That's why I've been going to council meetings year after year after year as a citizen, commenting on matters like the budget, like other matters, letting people know what's happening. That's why, as a planning commissioner, I've made sure to mention in my communications key events that are happening in the city so people can be aware of them. I think that community engagement is a critical part of the treasurer's role that hasn't been done enough, and that needs to be done. I'm honored to have been endorsed by my fellow planning commission members, Councilmember Murphy and others, and I would appreciate the endorsement of the Democratic Party. My website is menisfortreasurer.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much.